Okay, so this video might not be the one that you want to see. Of course, when you talk about the 2023 NHL Draft, everybody is talking about the big three: Bedard, Michkov, Fantilli. Not surprising, right? But when it comes to the unfortunate reality that is the Montreal Canadiens season, if you go over to the NHL standings, you will realize that this team isn't actually last. In fact, they're far from it. They're in the 23rd worst spot in the league right now at the time of recording this audio, and that's based off of a combination of both points and points percentage, meaning that there are, realistically, at the time of recording this piece, about 3, 4, 5 teams maybe even, that very well realistically can finish below Montreal in the draft standings. Now, of course, this doesn't necessarily mean that the Canadiens are guaranteed to not getting first overall. They could still get it if they win the lottery. Same could be said about second overall. But when it comes to where the Habs are, I think it's sort of high time to start opening ourselves up to the idea that in the 2023 draft, the one that may be putting on that Habs sweater for the first time may not be one of those top-tier players. In fact, I wanted to talk about somebody who is a top-tier player, but who just isn't one of Fantilli, Bedard, or Michkov. Today, let's go over to Sweden and talk about the Örebro Hockey Club, and go over the 17-year-old forward that has been absolutely dominating over there, Leo Carlsson. Now, we had talked about Carlsson in a prior video on this draft. We made a video discussing how good this draft is comparative to prior years, and long story short, the draft's good. Michkov, Bedard, Fantilli, even Leo Carlsson himself, all these guys most likely would have gone first overall had they been eligible in 2021 and 2022. You could debate Alexis Lafreniere 2020, but that's not a debate I want to have in this video here. Leo Carlsson is a 17-year-old forward, 6'3", 194 as a center winger. He can play all 3 forward positions, and he's a left-handed guy. This season for Örebro in the Swedish Hockey League, the guy has 12 points in 17 games played. Now, if you know your hockey leagues and you know how general point progression works for guys that are not old, Leo Carlsson being on pace for 50-ish points in the SHL, which is the top league in Sweden, at only 17 turning 18 years old, that's huge. Like, that is incredible production, and we haven't seen anybody really in the past few years have anywhere close to that in terms of their SHL point production. In fact, we had talked about this in the prior video, but the only guys that have gone out there and sort of matched this level of point production, you have guys like the Sedins, you have Peter Forsberg. It's a pretty limited list. This is why Carlsson is seen by many as a potential top pick. Sportsnet has him at number 4, Future Considerations has him at 5, Mackenzie has him at 5, Button has him at 6. It's only really the Hockey News that has him at number 19, which makes things a little bit wonky, but then you see Dauber, they also have him at number 4, so Carlsson is pretty much in that boat. The reason we're talking about Carlsson and the Canadiens is because of a post made by Mr. Edmo. I had to reread that for a little bit. M. Redmo or Mr. Edmo, something like that, on the Canadian subreddit. What they did was they posted an excerpt from a Scott Wheeler article and what a user has to ask about MATVEI MICHKOV. Wheeler then links Michkov and the situation to other players in the draft to the Montreal Canadiens, which is why this article or this excerpt was being posted on the Canadian subreddit in the first place. The question, asked by Harris B, goes over MATVEI MICHKOV and asks if Wheeler is concerned about the lack of playing time in the KHL. If you go over to the end, though, skip past the entire thing because I don't really want to talk about Michkov in this draft. I can't imagine MATVEI MICHKOV falling any lower than 3rd or maybe 4th overall if the right team is drafting 3rd. That team covets a center, and Carlsson keeps at it in the SHL. Coincidentally, the Montreal Canadiens might just be one of those teams. Clear void at center? Check. See their depth after Nick Suzuki. High-end young talent on the wing? Check. See Cole Caulfield and Slavkovsky. If it were me, I'm still taking Michkov. He is just that good. Carlsson's a star prospect. Michkov is one of the best prospects a hockey superpower has ever produced. And then there's a little bit more conversation going on about Michkov, but I really wanted to focus on that 17-year-old Leo Carlsson and how he might relate to this conversation too. Obviously, Montreal, if they're drafting first, they're taking Bedard. Every team is going to be taking Bedard. You can debate Michkov and his uncertainty as to when he's going to come over to North America as a factor there as well. Fantilli is doing really well in the NCAA, but let's say the Canadiens draft fourth. Let's say they have a few more games like they did against Vegas, where Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slafkovsky are getting points and goals and Dach is getting assists, yet the team still loses in regulation. Let's say there are a lot more games like that one happening over the next few weeks, and the Canadiens end up finishing fourth in the draft. If Leo Carlsson is the guy, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, he's kind of the best guy that is available right after the big three, but the question proposed by Wheeler, not directly, but sort of the thought that is provoked here, is whether or not the Canadiens drafting at, let's say, third, went with a guy like Carlsson over Michkov. Now, when it comes to the quote-unquote lack of center depth on the Canadiens, I think that really does depend on what Kirby Dach inevitably becomes. Right now, he's playing on the right wing, and he's been very good at it, but he was supposed to be a primary center, so methinks there is a little bit of a question mark as to what the Canadiens could be thinking with Dach heading into the next few years, but if you go with this hypothetical example and you say, hey, maybe they just decide to keep Dach with Suzuki and Caulfield. They keep him as the number one winger to be on the right side over there, and Slafkovsky will eventually take over that role sometime down the line. Who really knows? Then I could totally understand if they went the Michkov route instead, saying, hey, no, we're going to go for the winger. We'll go for the Russian guy. Carlsson, I mean, he can play the wing, but Michkov is just simply better. But if you really did decide to keep Dach on the wing, don't move him back, keep him there, and have your center core feature the likes of Dvorak and Monahan, and I guess everybody else that's tossed around in there, then a guy like Leo Carlsson isn't a bad bet. And I mean, if you go through some of the other draft rankings that have him a lot lower, you might even be able to get this guy a tad further down in the draft if you're lucky with how the rest of the picks end up going. As we had said, the Canadiens are not a bottom feeder directly at last place like they were last year. They're kind of in the mix with many other teams that have been sort of fading away as well. If the Canadiens don't do what we had said they might be able to do, which is end up going on a regulation losing streak sometime down the line, then that would mean that they're winning games, and as a result, they might actually fall down in the draft standings. So I think this conversation of opening up the floor to potentially other prospects that might be of value for the Canadiens in the draft is sort of valuable to have. It's sort of similar to the Why I Want videos that we used to make back in 2017-18. If you'd been subscribed since that time, then you would know that Why I Want wasn't always just a regular prospect series. It was mostly just me talking about prospects and how they could benefit the Canucks because, I mean, they're my favorite team, so of course I was making videos about them. But inevitably, we're going to be making some more videos about other guys, I guess, so if you wanted to go into the comments and let me know, who do you want to see and why I want? That's probably something valuable that I think we need to discuss here. Of course, we're going to cover the top guys, Michkov, Fantilli, Bedard, I guess Carlsson too. Then there are other names thrown in there as well, like Sale. It really does depend on who you ask. But either way, talk in the comments your thoughts about Montreal Canadiens prospects and who you think they should target at the 2023 NHL Draft. Of course, Bedard is number one, so if they take first, they're going to take Bedard. But if Leo Carlsson, for example, is the guy there instead, what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on Scott Wheeler saying that the Canadiens might actually be one of these teams that is targeting Leo Carlsson in this year's draft? Do you think that's a good move? Do you like the guy? Do you think he'll be better than any of the other guys? Also, let me know in the comments as well, what are your thoughts on the top of the draft? Is it Bedard, Michkov, Fantilli, Carlsson in that order for you? There are some other people that have tossed in a few other names and have scrambled it about a little bit, so if anybody wants to tell me, hey, if you actually do like Carlsson more than Michkov or more than Adam Fantilli, let me know in the comments why. I don't think anybody's going to say that Connor Bedard is not number one, so I would probably dismiss that idea from being discussed here, but for any other prospect combination, talk in the comments all your thoughts. If you were the Habs GM and you were destined to picking, let's say, third overall, who do you end up taking? Is it guaranteed MATVEI MICHKOV, or are you thinking about Carlsson as well? Talk in the comments all your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.